and risk analysis, building code, fire code, and accessibility compliance reviews, develops code compliance strategies and alternate solutions, interfaces with local authorities, and reviews of alternative solutions and preparation of fire safety plans. Amal conducts building inspections and audits, assists manufacturers with development of construction product entry in a new market, supports construction industry suppliers with product testing, evaluations to obtain approval and certifications, and assists with peer reviews and engineering judgment, preparation and reviews. Ms. Amal Tamim's experience encompasses global construction products, technical standards and approval, setting up and developing new market presence for testing, certification, and fire protection consulting services in the Gulf region, where she collaborated closely with the local fire authorities on developing fire safety product reviews and approvals programs, supporting manufacturers, agencies, designers, and developers with fire and life safety and compliance review services in all construction sectors, including commercial, residential, educational, industrial, mixed use, logistics, transportation, and nuclear, as well as conducting fire and life assessment audits and reviews of existing facilities and assisting building and facility owners in addressing fire code violations. On a personal note, it was a privilege for me to work with Amal Tamim in several cities, from Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Cairo, the state of Washington, and the state of Arizona. My good friend Amal, the audience are yours, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Imad, for this introduction. I appreciate that. And thank you for the ICC Global for allowing me to present today and give my perspective on the challenges and opportunities for transformation of fire code enforcement. I'm going to share my screen now. Can you please let me know when you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to put it in presentation mode. Okay. Great. All right. Which screen do you see right now? Are you seeing the presentation mode, or are you still seeing the PowerPoint template mode?
I still see the PowerPoint.
You're still seeing the PowerPoint, not the full screen?
Correct.
Okay, I'm gonna share another screen then. It's automatically defaulting to screen one, so I'll do that. Stop share. Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. So, we're gonna start today, and just to give you a little bit of background about myself, there's a little bit more on the personal. You heard about the professional. I started with working in fire safety and actually just safety. And since back home, I'm originally Lebanese, and I studied in the U.S., worked in the U.S., moved to Canada, worked in Canada, and then worked in the Middle East, in the UAE, as well as in Oman, before coming back and resettling down in Montreal. And right now, I'm talking to you from wonderful Montreal in Quebec, Canada. So back home, when I was in Lebanon, before coming to study in the U.S., I was one of the person living in Beirut, and during our civil war, we had a shortage of doctors and medical staff in hospitals. And I was recruited by my neighbor to work to assist her with no background whatsoever in the medical laboratories to do evaluation on of blood, basically the blood types, and then do testing on blood in terms of to see if women are pregnant or not. So and she trained me to do some of these things. It goes back years ago. So you can see from the hair code. And I had no, I was still a high schooler. I had no background in any of that. But because of the need, I was ready to support, and I was ready to learn, and they were ready to welcome somebody with no knowledge like that, and to give them the training and share it with me, to be able to do that critical job. A critical job not unlike the critical job of the fire services around the world. What the mission of the fire services, we all understand it. I don't need to tell you about it, because most of the people I assume on this call are from the fire service and from enforcement agencies. And that's the calling. You've got the calling, you've got the will and the learning, and then depending on the setting, you're going to have to get your sleeves up and do it. And this is what the theme for the presentation today. It's the theme about, yeah, we know about the challenges we have as organizations, as individuals. When we're faced with new hazards, with those new technologies that are pushed down through political or advancements in the industry, then we have to deal with it and work with it. A little bit on my personal background with the fire service. When I went to school in Oklahoma State, and I was literally sitting living in the fire station, like on campus, Oklahoma State University in Stillwater. And I did like my little part of going on, calls, whether like emergency assisting the EMTs, or the putting out bushfires and the occasional house fires. I appreciated the amount of commitment and dedication the fire service had. That was not my calling. I figured that very quickly. But I kept the calling of fire safety by by pursuing my studies in fire protection, and I went ahead and continued at WPI to gain my degree in fire protection engineering, my master's in fire protection engineering. And then I continued my path, and we crossed paths with Imad when the International Building Code was being developed, when we were looking at WOBO, and we were looking at Building Safety Foundation with a few of the West Coast and the building officials and fire officials. So my participation in the code development in the US was very intimate. I was participated on ICC hearings, participated in NFPA committee on NFPA 1, as well as still participate on standards development committee. And when I moved back to Canada, I was so this is a little bit of background on my path. One final point is in developing countries, or in countries that have developed quite a bit, but they didn't have the infrastructure of regulations and enforcements ready. What I did a little bit of time in around 5 years in the MENA region, in Dubai, as well as Oman. And when I was in Dubai, I was literally embedded with my I had a contract to develop the Warrington Fire business for testing, certification, and consulting, and setting it up at that time. And I was embedded with Dubai Civil Defense at that time to help them develop their review and of products and submissions, and then set up the platform for the foundations that from which a lot of people contributed to, and then it grew, and we're seeing today some of the cool things that they're doing in Dubai in terms of Imad, you've contributed to that, so through building code development and fire code improvements to the fire codes and all that. So that's an effort that it takes a whole lot of people to set up, and different skills, different disciplines, and different stakeholders that are doing that, and a lot of contributions from the industry. So I introduced concepts, collaboration, industry stakeholders, just getting your sleeves up and starting getting the right training to do that. So enough on my bio, on myself. We're gonna get into the topics for today. And for today, we're gonna look at the background and the role of fire department and fire service activities in enforcing codes. I wanted to do a little more research on different regions besides my own experience, but frankly, I'm just gonna speak from my own experience. And then we're going to look at the examples of new technologies presenting fire safety challenges to authorities. And then we're gonna talk about opportunities in learning using examples from fire service enforcement organizations, from the literature, from articles and news, and from interfacing with local authorities on different projects. And then tools, and then give some tools and tips on addressing compliance and enforcement challenges from that for those new technologies. Imad, just one question. Are we keeping the question?
Amal, this is Lawrence. Yes, we're going to keep the questions till the end. The users can and the attendees can use the chat window to go ahead and ask questions, and we'll cover them at the end. If they're not covered at the very end, we'll make sure that they get covered afterward and send an email.
Excellent. Okay, good. So we're gonna go a little bit of history on the codes. So everybody heard, I hope, about the king of Hammurabi of Babylon, and that's ancient Iraq, and that's where the first known building code. And that basically it said, you shall, if a house falls and kills its owner or his child, then the builder or his child will be slain in retaliation. That's basically really the ultimate performance and penalty, and stick-based codes and regulation out there. So you have all the freedom of building, and you have all the freedom of constructing, but you will be assuming responsibility for the life of the persons who occupy that house. Now, he did not address all the rest of the sectors, construction sectors, but you can imagine what would happen if he did that. No, we wouldn't have no industry, and we would have no development, because when you're dealing with innovation, there is lots of failures, lots of learning that needs to be happening, and before you get it right. So today's codes, thankfully, are more elaborate and less punitive. And the codes, what they do is they will look at all the technical issues related to property protection, safety, fire safety, health and accessibility, fire responder safety, environment, and energy efficiencies. And they set up this whole framework of requirement, prescriptive requirement, or even performance-based requirements for building and fire safety. And we'll get to the fire code a little bit more in detail. This is just an overview. And then the codes, whether fire or buildings, are adopted through regulations and become law, and they reflect the knowledge at the time of development. Unfortunately, because of lengthy processes in some regions of the world, North America, for example, by the time the new code gets adopted, it's already behind the ball with technology and science because of the length of code development. The codes also did reference standards, and these are the tools you're going to use to meet some of the provisions of the codes. And these standards have their own process for development through committees, and address additional hazards related to specific processes, specific type of products, etc. Now, each country has developed its own system for writing codes and standards. We don't all share the same way of doing things around the globe. The ICC have that mission. It's a really good mission to help achieve that. There is the political and the legal frameworks that some countries have to work within to address to develop their own codes and standards, which makes this whole regulatory framework around the world very diverse. Now, the development in North America is through volunteer efforts, mostly in the US for development and international codes. In Canada, it's between the National Research Council with voluntary members of committees that are designated, and then it's like without open hearings. However, now with our process being more open to allow observers in our hearing in our committees. So the codes are developed on a national level, so it could be developed on a state level also, and they will be developed on a municipal level. So you will have amendments, and some states may not have a national one. Some countries may not have a national codes, but the cities may have their own. In some cases, the government, the government civil departments may have authority to set the law, the requirements, and enforcing the codes. In some cases, it's the national defense departments who have that responsibility. And that really changes when we get to Asia and MENA and countries in Europe. In North America, it's within the realm of the provinces and the states and the cities and the municipality. So the enforcement can reside with civil defense and appointment national or state agency. So that speaks to my other point. The fire safety codes and standards typically in North America are revised on a set change cycle. And sometimes there was interim amendment that are made. And in some places, there is no set cycle. The regulations get updated based on needs, based on agendas, based on industry, based on politics, and then all that gets translated into modifications that will happen through, through codes development and standards development. Now, the regulatory frameworks are very strong in some regions around the globe, and in some others, they are still developing the frameworks. In terms of prevention, there's a lot of public awareness efforts going on across the globe to educate about fire safety. And that's with the help of international organization, local organization, and the fire services. That mission is shared across the board in terms of fire prevention. The enforcement and permitting in some regions is very well established. However, in other regions, it's not, while it is established, it's not as rigorous. And in some regions, there's whether maybe it is in law, but however, there is no oversight of construction and industrial facilities. Of course, there is lots of ills within society, and our industry is not free of them either. So we get to the fire service role, and I'm going to focus on the fire prevention role because that's where the fire code enforcement is happening traditionally. In some parts of the US, the fire code enforcement resides with the building department. In some cases, is subdivided between the fire and building. But we'll call it the fire prevention role, where the fire code enforcement happens. And part of that, there's some of the functions include inspections, they include plan reviews, they include permitting, and they include reviewing fire safety plans. Whether they approve it or not, that depends on the local regulations. looking at the hazard and material logs and statements for each facilities, looking at emergency management plan. That varies, but these are some of the functions that fire department may or may not be involved in addition to inspections. So as part of and permitting of fire life safety systems related to fire codes requirements. Another function of for the fire prevention within the fire service is education, awareness campaigns, and they have their own technical specialists to support the work that they do. Another function within the fire service outside the fire prevention role is investigations and emergency response, obviously with operation training, special hazards response, hazmat mines, search and rescue. And that varies depending on the region of the world. That those functions may be divided between the fire service and civil defense. And some fire services, like some fire services, will only do firefighting and don't do any of the other functions in terms of response. So the theme here is it varies, but there's basic elements that we can learn from. So we get to the modern fire codes. Forget Hammurabi and killing people if somebody dies and because of how they constructed the house. The fire codes today, I'm showing 2 examples. So we've got the International Fire Code, and of course the NFPA have their own code. In Ontario, we have our own code. In Canada, we have your own code. In Europe, every country have their own code. Similarly, in Asia, Australia, and the MENA region, and some parts of Africa where there is a building and a fire code combined, or like one fire safety code or one life safety code, depends on the region of the world. In the US, we do have, and in Canada, we have a fire code. The International Fire Code is adopted by the states or the cities, and they bring their own amendments to it, and that gets published too. So what is the purpose of the fire code? In order for us to know how we're going to be enforcing this code to address the hazards of new technologies, what is enabling us to do that is the adoption of that code allows us to establish the minimum requirement to safeguard public health. These are the objectives we talked about earlier, the safety and general welfare from the hazards of fire, explosion, and dangerous conditions in new and existing buildings, structures, and premises, and to provide safety and assistance to firefighters and emergency responders during emergency operations. So public health, welfare, safety, and emergency responders safety. And it's really, we're looking at the hazards, addressing the hazards of fire, explosion, and dangerous conditions. And that brings us to the higher hazards of new technologies. And the role of the enforcing agency in this case are outlined. And you can see that there are permitting requirements, there are there's inspection functions, there's certification, there is stop work orders. So actually the enforcement agency can stop the work in case of unsafe conditions. Now, the scope of the fire code, it's elaborates on the purpose of the code. So you will be looking at all the conditions hazardous to life, property, and public welfare, to the building and adjacent, like the use of the building, from the occupancy of the buildings, any elements related to the extension, repair, and alteration of the buildings. You're looking at the safeguards and to give a reasonable degree of life and property. Another example, I'm showing here is from Ontario. I worked quite a bit of time in Ontario before moving back to Canada, and this is showing you some of the elements of offenses and enforcement that are part of the fire service enforcement of the fire code. So not only you're dealing with emergencies and fire investigations and inspection, you're also the law when addresses all the offenses and violation and compliance orders and the fees associated or the penalties associated with that. So we've got our fire codes, we've got our regulations, we know the requirements for what has been known to date. What is in the fire code as well as building code is based on historical events. So we learn from historical events, we update the codes, and that's what we get. The original code that was done at addressing fire life safety is that we, from which all the rest of the codes kind of built, is really the building exit codes, which was developed and now which is the FPA 101. It was as a result of fires. So you learn from disasters, you learn from experience, and then you develop the code. For grandstands, you had the Ringling Brothers and Bailey Circus, where folding and telescopic seating. Maybe at that time that was an innovation, but however, it was that with that fire, then new provisions went in. Interior finish and exiting, school children died in that fire. The sprinklers requirements with the Hartford Hospital. Fire alarm and public address with the Beverly Hills Supper Club fire. The fire alarm public address systems were introduced. Recently was Grenfell fire, the exterior cladding, the single egress in high-rise building conditions. That's we're learning from that today. Now, these are, you would say, well, some of these are not innovations, but however, we need to learn from disaster most of the time. That's how the codes, it gets changed and address problems. Standards from, we don't need it. I hope we don't need it, but it's going to happen. Standards for structural fire resistant material performance, that's on the One Meridian Plaza, where sprinklers were not installed in all the buildings, and there was problems with the fireproofing, delamination, and structural steel did not behave. There was problem with emergency power supply, standpipes, lots of issues on that a lot of things changed afterwards in the building code and the fire code. So those things we learn from experience, we learn from disasters and from fire incidents. A big one here is I'm going to show you a couple of examples, because when we're dealing with challenges and how we evolve and we learn, past experiences are critical. With the MGM Grand Fire in Paradise, Nevada, not to confuse it with Paradise, California, town that was wiped out because of the wildfire in 2018. The hotel was not equipped with sprinkler system. It had faulty dampers. There was lots of fire safety violations that went, nowhere. They never were corrected. So the fire enforcement, maybe the fire, you're dealing with it on buildings, but however, nothing is happening. And this is what some of the fire services will recognize, that we still have those problems today. Again, pushing in changes into to put in sprinklers in building, putting features like proper ventilations, exit maps, smoke detectors, look at fixing the wiring and all that. Getting the right things done takes law, takes enforcement, takes oversight, and in this case, it was overridden by political and lack of responsibility by some parties. So as a result of this fire, there was dramatic changes in Nevada, and we've seen it in Las Vegas specifically also, which we've seen it in the construction since then. In the Grenfell Tower, that's in the UK, has gone through a change of regulation on how they do enforcement. A lot of it went into looking at defaulting it down to risk assessors and not much oversight by building enforcement and fire enforcement. However, in this case, a lot of other things went wrong, including the cladding materials and the performance of the cladding materials and declaration of performance of cladding materials, in the design and checking and follow up. A lot of things that went wrong with the Grenfell fire. I don't need to tell you what happened there. It's a tragedy that we're still dealing with it, and a lot of reports have been published on it. Systematic dishonesty, disregard to safety of industry practices. So these are currently challenges the industry deal with, the enforcement and the enforcement community grapples with. This is nothing new. So we have existing challenges, and on top of that, we have to deal with new challenges of new technology. I'm not going to go through a lot of these elements. Some failures here on the London Fire Brigade's training and a lack of strategy to evacuate people, buildings with single stairs, block stairs, access to stairs, all kind of things that went wrong in this in this fire. And how the building safety is managed in England was in Wales was declared seriously defective. And it's really started with a fridge. With that, and then the fire went out from that room into the cladding, and with the problem with the cladding, it spread up, and the problem was the exiting. In the building, things just disaster happened. So with that background in terms of enforcement, with the history of fire codes get developed, the responsibility of fire code enforcement agencies, how we learn from our mistakes, we learn from disaster, we learn from tragedies, to change regulations. We're being presented now with technologies that present new fire challenges. Some of them I'm mentioning here. You will see that it is the lithium-ion batteries, whether we're talking about EV, electrical vehicles, buses, e-bikes, telephones, charging infrastructure, battery energy storage systems, the BESS, on a utility scale or local scale, whether in underground, above ground, in marine, on a plane. You've seen people, seen those videos on the plane with, smoke. What do you do when you've got smoke and the quick reaction that stewardess have to do in that case. Other problems we're seeing with this new technology, how is waste handling facilities are grappling with it. And they're developing new technologies to quickly detect any sign of potential fire hotspots and target it with water suppression directed to it in order to prevent disaster from happening. Advanced manufacturing technologies where fire services might need to go in, but those have a lot of complex equipment, materials probably unknown or something that are known to. So preparation and knowing where you're going into, how you're going to be navigating those equipment. We talk about batteries. The battery technology fabrication processes involve nanoparticles of materials in that production process. What do you do when you're exposed to those nanoparticles? How are you protected from them? Automated storage and retrieval warehouses and distribution centers. That's, maybe people will not consider technology and new technology as a new challenge, but they are challenges to our fire service. Yeah, Factory Mutual is doing lots of testing to protect them and give us guidelines on that. That's not making its way directly into the fire code, and it's going to take some time to do that. But we do have best practices related to that. Again, it's like, how do you deal with those fires? How does the fire service and the fire code prepare the fire responders to learn about those hazards? Is mass timber, like, are really, we talk about mass timber, is it a new technology? Is it really? Is it basically combustible material that's protected? And it's taken up to higher levels. Like, is that a new technology? Maybe it's an old technology being revisited and now reconstructed again with different protection measures. But are we prepared to, how are we prepared to go to function, operate, evacuate, and protect? Same thing with the hydrogen fuel cell propulsion technology. Like, hydrogen is not new hazard. Hydrogen, we've been sending people to to the moon. We've been sending shuttles, and and now new types of space equipment is being sent. Hydrogen is being used in the industry for a long time. Its hazards are known. These are not new hazards. The challenge is that the hydrogen is being used with public transit, on rails, on buses, on trucks, on electrical vehicles. And the challenge comes in from the use, not and understanding how that operation and how we are going to be protecting for it in those types of uses. The other aspects is the high wind turbine and solar panels. Nuclear industry is an old news. I hope we all know how to handle that. But the space industry and the nuclear industry have developed their own requirements, have developed their own checks and balances beyond codes. And there is some things for us to learn from that as we look at new technologies and hazards. The figure here I have, the picture here I have is just over a week ago. In Montreal, we had a major lithium battery fire in a shipping container in the port of Montreal, which is not too far away from me. And basically they had to have a stay in place call for people because of the smoke and from that fire, the potential toxic gases, and then for whole blocks of residential neighborhood around that area. So yeah, it's not too far than a residential neighborhood. So that was pretty scary, but then it got contained and controlled very quickly, like within the day, the 24 hours, I think they had it under control. Okay. So the challenges. The lack of standardized guidelines for review of new technologies. So because of the slowness of the process, sometimes we don't, most of the times the guidelines are not ready-made, and the industry pushes things to market to the designers and within the manufacturing industrial complex before any guidelines. Sometimes the developers of those technologies are very responsible. They will have the guidelines ready, and they will train users in the safety of that technology. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. And most of the time, because of the different uses of that technology has not been planned for by the designers or the manufacturers of that new technology, and when it's used in the wrong ways, they have no control. So their safety data sheets, their safety guidelines evolve as they learn from from the market, from the users of their products. So the rapid pace of innovation, you always have to catch up for it. There's no mandate to initiate. Like in a lot of the jurisdictions, a lot of fire fire code enforcement agencies. Some of them do not even have mandate to initiate, develop, and implement regulatory changes. They rely on politicians, or they rely on a higher level of agencies to do that, even though on the local level they're dealing with it, and the attention spans of the higher levels of governments do not, may not have the same priorities on a local level. The code development, it may be too long to keep rapid pace with the innovation, or not, and then you've got high level of details of complex installations and submissions that the fire service, code enforcement staff have to look at, and that requires specialist knowledge. You need to look at sometimes also you're facing the challenges of reviewing things and getting it out on time because of pressures of the market, of pressures of the permit applicant, financial constraints, that there is always this challenge of balancing the permitting time, review time, and how to and getting the proper staff to do it, knowledge and information to properly do that assessment to meet the intent of public and safety and welfare set of the fire code. There's no clear path always for partnering with industry to develop innovative solution to handle that hazard on a local level. Some industries have set up some association to help the local, like the ICC, like in different regions. Like there is some level of partnering with industry on the hydrogen safety, on EV safety. There is some organization on FPA. They have set up some elements related to specific types of hazard to support. But the industry, the manufacturers, the suppliers that are introducing those new technologies to the market, there's not always, they are the ones to reach out to also. And there is no clear path for partnering with them. Nepal, like this is some of the challenges and the recent fires. In Nepal, it's basically developing country. You've got any fire within, it's a recipe for disaster within some of the housing communities, very densely poor. And if you have an industry or some activity in the air that start a fire, that could be very dangerous. There's lax regulation, poor enforcement of existing rules, deficient infrastructure. So there's always a constant threat. So in terms of poverty and fast urban growth, introducing new hazards, you're duplicating the chances of having big fires with casualties. Factory Mutual publishes some insights on yearly insights on industrial fires, and this is a couple of them. So we're still dealing with industrial chemical fires in the pharmaceutical industry. We're still dealing with packaging and factories. These are just typical things that we're dealing with. Are they new? No, but they are still new in certain places of the world. So we're still seeing dust-related explosion, even though we have standards and a lot of NFPA fire protection handbooks and information in our standards and regulation and guidance related to it, we still see it. The new technology, this is a new one, it's like battery fires. So the South Koreans, they really developed ahead of us all kind of fire batteries, and they are reeling from the impacts of battery fires in electrical vehicles. So you put an electric vehicle in a basement, you don't have the proper protection, you got a fire, and what happens? You got people that need to leave their homes, you've got vehicles that are damaged, no electricity, water outage. So a lot of time to get to the fire and with injuries. Those fires are increasing. They're constantly increasing. Well, and I've got the statistics on this from France and Korea. So it's not going away. The more people use it, the more of it is going to be on the market, the higher probability of having those incidents and seeing them. So the current state of fire code enforcement. This is an example of what the fire code enforcers are dealing with. You're dealing with doing inspections. You're dealing with violation. Remember the MGM grant, violations that sat. This is just from 2018. The number of violations that are cited, even in regular types of occupancies, are very significant. And you're dealing with fire hazard, material storage, electrical installation, lack of emergency planning, blocked exits, broken exits, failure to maintain. Now, if that's happening, that's our reality today. And I believe Halifax is a good example of what's happening around typical communities. Then imagine like how much the challenge is for the local service. Halifax is about 500,000 inhabitants, 14th largest in Canada, around, what is that, 2,000 square miles. And they had their first fire regulation around the same time Boston, just almost a century after Boston got their fire regulation in 1752. Big explosion because of ammunition ship in Halifax Harbor, killed a lot of people, injured a lot of people, and that was a big learning experience for Halifax at that time. And let's see what is happening today. So you've got fire prevention people enforcing, doing oversight based on fire code requirements, and they have to prioritize their services. And they're facing local challenges. So where do you focus on? You have to identify the risks in your area. You have to, the number one priority is to get to the buildings that have the highest risk, and then ensuring that that these are covered. Let's see. The number of people that are available to do those inspections for fire code enforcement is pretty limited. The target inspections for high-risk buildings with basically you need, because of the lack of resources, you're gonna just focus on the highest risk buildings that you know from history, from your knowledge of that community, from your local statistics, that they have problems and of potential of having a fire in them. How do you make up for the rest? You get to do it with education. New York City, that's another example of how they dealt with the lithium battery fire problem. So we move from the global condition that we live in, that we function in as fire service enforcement. And then we look at, okay, how did they deal with the problem? I'm giving here the example of New York City. New York City is one of the largest metropolitan cities in North America. A lot more resources than your typical fire service agency. They have the law. They have a lot. They can promulgate their own regulation. They can promulgate changes to the building and the fire codes and set their own requirements. And they have a history of partnering with the national NIST for doing testing, observing, and for terms of operations. So they know how to work with stakeholders. They know how to work collaborate with industry, hold public workshops. They've been using statistics and AI and all kind of technological tools to look at trends within their community. So addressing the problem of lithium battery fire problems, specifically with e-bikes and e-mobility and devices, they developed new regulation. They developed public safety awareness. They collaborated with research and industry and developed and reached out to stakeholders. They developed technical solution. One of them is those switch boxes for changing batteries for the e-bikes so that people don't have to do them and charge them at home, and to place batteries that have been used up. So these are targeted enforcement, handling the specific problems, problem of batteries for specific conditions. They basically eliminated put in requirements to put for having certified, listed e-mobility devices, tested, listed, approved, and then you can see that there is reduction of the fire hazard as a result of those activities. So that's, we learn from experience, we learn from what others are doing, we get things done. So what are the opportunities now for the fire service and enforcement? Get to know the best practices, see what those big cities are doing, what they have done, what they have, you know, what are the standards out there? What are what's NFPA? What's Factory Mutual? I'm talking about North America. In Europe, you have your own European standards. In Australia, you've got some things. But the internet is a wealth of information that is open for everybody to get information that is available publicly on all kinds of hazards. California has a lot of occupational health and safety requirements specific to dusts and chemicals beyond what other health regulations have in North America. So that these are things that people can look at. If you have the resources to get specialized staff, like chemical safety, fire engineers, process safety, and AI, to look at to mobilize a workforce that enables you to handle and do proper evaluations and reviews. The simulation and based training of handling different types of fire scenarios is also new tools that's available. Digital inspection, remote inspection. These are some of the elements that can be done. Data analytics, and we'll go some of the data analytics elements and the uses of that. Partnering in research and training. You've got different associations that do that. The fire marshals, the fire commissioners, they do the incident investigations. They do train fire service agencies. They share with them knowledge based on what the investigations you know, and studies they've been doing, and that's something available. And then try to work on either engaging with code development if you're able to do make changes locally, develop that, implement fire safety plan requirements. A lot of times the current regulations do not, especially in Canada in some regions, the fire safety plan is required to be prepared, but nobody approves it in some jurisdictions, not all of them. So in some jurisdiction, the fire code has requirement in North America for hazardous material statements, emergency management plan, that's under the jurisdiction of the fire service enforcement agency. Try to get information. The more you know about the hazard, and requesting that information to review gives you the tool to be able to the information critical to develop solution on how to address it. This is a statement from Jeremy Futrell from just over a week ago on a conference in Australia at the National Council for Fire Emergency Services. And this one, I'm going to read it. We are seeing increasing complexity and interconnectedness develop in our society and the built environments, along with the emergence of new technologies that are often not only innovative and disruptive, but may also challenge the safety of the community. To best deal with these challenges, professionals working in the fire life safety field rely on deep technical special knowledge. However, this alone will not suffice. More than ever, knowledge sharing and collaboration within outside of our sector is critical. So that really speaks. I found that, you know, like from the conference, this is the topic. I wish I was there to hear what he was saying, but I felt this is exactly what this presentation is about. So some of those organizations that are out there, these are in North America, the Fire Safety Research Institute. They're doing a lot of research for the fire services, dealing with Batley's wildfires. The EV Fire Save in Australia, they're doing a great job tracking electric vehicle fires, giving resources and information on their website. NIST and NRC have been doing research on mass timber, supporting fire departments to look at how they respond to those house fires and understanding the performance of those that construction under fire. NFPA research and training, of course, ICC codes and standards and training. For hydrogen safety, the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. So these are some of the potential partners and information that you can reach out to. Data analytics is very important. Data analytics, Dubai Civil Defense in the UAE, they've been presenting in North America and Europe about their use of AI to enhance readiness, preparedness, to predict probability of fire accidents. New York has been using Firecast to know which buildings will most likely have fires, and I'll put a little bit more information on that. And they use that information to target highest risk building, optimize resource allocation, and collect data to support responders and to develop strategies for to address through either public awareness campaigns or through making changes to the code. So in New York City, they have 49 battalion districts, and they develop scores on the fire history and characteristic of individual neighborhoods, and they continually update their data stream to improve their the database and get information on the risk scores of buildings and communities to basically support their fire response, fire prevention, and enforcement role. They include data from 17 different agencies for every one of 330,000 buildings. That's 2 years ago. There's probably more buildings now. Each is given a fire score, and that gets updated on a daily basis. So the score may changes, and really the data that they're collecting, even like a trash violation, which is not a fire service function, it's another agency in the health agency in the city. If that building gets a violation for trash, then that's going to increase its risk score, because if you're not managing potential that hazard, then you're really not doing things properly. Phone reporting data is collected, and that's also influencing the risk scores for complaints about the specific buildings or facilities, industrial facilities, or anything. So artificial intelligence, data collection strategy, geographic information system, also that same tool can predict areas surrounding a burning wildfire and and it is being used in other places for those types of uses. So with understand the risk that you have today. With new technologies, you will know where you need to focus the efforts on handling that risk, and which types of facilities. Use risk assessment to evaluate new technology and implications on the communities, and focus fire prevention inspection efforts based on that. Don't go as far as what London Fire Brigade has done, because that resulted in Grenfell. So oversight is still important. You don't, even if you're doing risk assessment, enforcement and oversight is still important. Can't repeat that enough. Request digital documents, and for anything related to fire safety, hazard management, emergency management, inspection and testing, all that can be shared in the cloud and can be available, and request that, make that a requirement. AI-powered cameras, they have their own problems, but they've been used for monitoring signals of smoke and for dealing with waste handling facilities. But anything with Internet of Things, with AI, with drones and robotics. All these are cool things we can use. What we need to remember as we use those things, we need to remember that accuracy, privacy, and security is of utmost concerns, and they're still not being resolved. We've seen the security breached with the pager beepers in Lebanon. Anything can happen. The privacy with in the release of documents, or accessing nuclear power plants, or if it can happen on such large scale, it can happen on a smaller scale. So be mindful of security, be mindful of privacy, be mindful of accuracy, and work within those, and put the right things and have the right people involved as you're putting those things to test in your communities, so that you don't get problems down the line. So mobile. So in conclusions, evolving codes do address the hazards. They may take longer time. Technology's advancements bring in new hazards. There are lots of places that we can learn, we can train, we can engage with industry, with community. We have tools that we have identified today that hopefully that will be considered. And partnership is key. Partnership with research, partnership with industry, professional association, using the technology, developing the technology is critical. Having the qualified staff or reaching out to qualified organization is also contingent. With that, I'm done. Sorry, I took up almost the whole hour, but we can open it to questions.
Again, this is Lawrence from International Code Council. If you have any questions, you can enter them into the chat function, or if you raise your hand, I'll go ahead and unmute you so that you can ask the questions directly to Amal. An absolute flood of questions here. No, Amal.
Nothing. I don't see anything.
Yeah, I know. It looks like it was a great webinar today, and there's not much. But if somebody thinks of a question later that they'd like to ask Amal or Ahmad, just send it to me or anybody else here, and we can address it at a later time. Yes, we do have a question in the chat now.
Hi, Mark. Good to have you on. I'm glad to see you here. How do we avoid overreacting to hazards of new technology? I think it's like, from which perspective? There is the perspective of the regulator, there's the perspective of the researchers, there's the perspective of the users. Sure, you can, I'll be sharing the PDF of this, and everybody will have it, no problem. So, and if you're thinking from the perspective, like the media makes a lot of fuss on, this, look at this. There's different industry forces also working, technologies, competing technologies, also influencing the overreaction. So from the perspective of the fire service enforcement, that the community that we work within, in terms of we look for information, we look to but we really cannot influence a lot how the media is doing, no matter how many, the state of the media today is not, is conducive to that overreaction. However, we stay within our lanes, we focus on the information, and that's how we avoid the overreacting. Fire services and regulators seem especially prone to making inferences from individual incidents. They're not, individual people, when they are seeing it, this is not something that fire services in general. I think individuals are influenced by what they see and overreact when we see one scenario of a horrible thing. But if you present them with the information, and they have they can make a proper judgment. The problem is the collaboration and reaching out between the industry and the fire service enforcement agency is not always there, and that's what I'm calling for in this presentation. Remind people that some industries are very good at it, some industries do not. And with the battery industry, it just happens that they just said, here, we throw it, use it, and then, we'll deal with it afterwards. So now we're dealing with that. Well, we're learning, and the fire service and the regulators are learning. There's lots of information, new information is regularly being put out there. The research that's being put out within academia is not significantly shared in lay terms with the rest of the world. So there is some efforts to be done from that side also to be sharing. Yep, that's good.
Amel,
Definitely, that's good.
Amel, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Having worked in Oman, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi, and then the US and Canada as well.
Yeah.
In the MENA region, the fire department is part of the Ministry of Interior. It has like a military type, presence. So I want you to shed some light, on how much of a collaboration between the architects and engineers. I mean, we know how the system in the US, but outside the US, it's a little bit, let's say, formal,
Yes, yeah. Actually, it's the same in Europe. In some parts of Europe, it is also the same. Like in France, it's a military organization, part of military organization. So you always, and in the MENA region, the same thing. You've got the civil defense. They are responsible, but the city also has its own role on the building code, whereas the civil defense is dealing with fire response. So there is need to make a delineation of responsibilities. There is need for training. There is need to educate, but the regulatory framework for roles and responsibilities is not as clear cut as we have it. So that's why you see that Dubai City, for example, was more ready in building enforcement and building control way before civil defense was. And even though civil defense is military and they have lots of more money, and they had focused on fire prevention and fire response, and they caught up in the last 10 years with fire codes and enforcement and inspections, and now exceeded everybody else with the adoption of AI. So there is work to be done. It's every region has its own path to open for itself, with the support of engineering and organization associations that are working there. So a lot of the education from architects, from manufacturers happens, and that's how we interfaced with the local civil defense people. And they learn. We hold workshop, we have organization chapters, we open chapters of our societies down there. So yeah, I mean, that happens, but it happens organically. It's not forced, but it's rather organic.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you.
Yeah. Our co-development is behind with new industry items and technologies. Any idea of how to speed? I mean, interim amendments is possible. Let's just have that when we can, if that's something that can be used, that tool can be used. But the regulatory framework for making changes to regulation it varies from city, town, province, state, and that's what it is. However, best practices through societies and associations are feasible. So if NFPA takes a long time to do something, if ICC takes a long time to do something, or City of New York takes a long time to do something, our organization, we're all members of organizations. We can develop white papers. We can develop, like for example, on APTA, we developed a white paper on risk of hydrogen and lithium batteries in rail, for rail equipment. because it's going to take forever to get it on a federal level and to get it on a local level. So we needed, as an industry, under the hat of the APTA, we developed guidelines with contribution from multiple players, from agencies as well as industry, as well as engineers. So they're under those groups, rally the forces and develop those guidelines. And once that they're out there, people can no longer ignore them. They become best practice. And law tells you cannot, if something happens and you knew of that best practice, you are liable. Any other questions?
Hello, Amber. This is Lawrence again. There isn't a certificate of attendance specifically for this, but I can probably work something out. If you want to contact me after this, I'll put my email address in the chat.
Do we see any other comments, questions from the audience?
I don't see any.
Well, with that, Amal.
Okay.
I think okay, great. Amal, it's been great seeing you. Thank you so much for your valuable time and the enlightenment here. We truly appreciate it, and we hope that we can get you in the future actually on another subject, of concern. So
it's my pleasure, Imad, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for watching. Please just keep your eyes open for future announcements on webinars coming up before the end of the year and starting next year as well. So with that, I hope to see all of you in Long Beach at our ICC annual pilgrimage, as I call it. So thank you very much for attending, and I'm going to turn back the floor to, or the audience, the floor to Lawrence. Lawrence?
Yes, thank you all again. This recording should be available in the next week or so. We may have a little bit of delays posting this one just because of that annual pilgrimage is coming up. So some of our staff is a little bit tied down right now, but hopefully we'll get it up as soon as possible so that if you did review it and you wanted to rewatch any parts of it, it'll be available for you. Thank you. Thank you, Amal, too. Really appreciated your conversation. And Ahmad, of course.
Thank you.
Take care of yourself, Amal.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.